There were some real feel-good stories up and down the grid at the season-opening 2025 Australian Grand Prix this weekend, but perhaps the most disappointing performance was not by a particular driver, but by a certain team. The oldest team, the most successful team in the history of Formula 1, the guys who have been there from the very start since 1950. Of course, I'm referring to Scuderia Ferrari. Now, there were rumours about Ferrari being the fourth fastest team on the grid going into the opening round at Melbourne, and to be honest, I think that might actually be a little generous given their performance overall during the race. But if we start in qualifying, they occupied the fourth row of the Charles Leclerc in 7th place and Lewis Hamilton in 8th. Now, these are two drivers that are renowned for qualifying speed. Charles Leclerc, in my opinion, is probably the fastest driver on the grid over one lap, and Sir Lewis Hamilton has more pole positions in Formula 1 than any other driver in the history of the sport, and all they could manage was 4th row of the grid. Now, during practice, it didn't seem that bad for them. They were up there mixing it with the McLarens and the Red Bulls and were markedly faster than the Mercedes, to be honest, but it turns out those lap times were not genuine, or at least their competition were sandbagging and not wanting to reveal their true pace, where Ferrari felt the need to reveal their true pace more than others. During the race, it was a real mixed bag for them. It was not positive though overall. Charles Leclerc ended up getting past the Racing Bull of Yuki Tsunoda and also the Williams of Alex Albon, both of whom actually started ahead of the Ferrari. So that's why I said arguably you could actually say that maybe the Ferrari is not even the fourth fastest car on the grid. The Racing Bulls have made massive strides, as have Williams. They are going to be a real threat this season for sure. And if, Kimi Antonelli and Liam Lawson both qualified really poorly, both out in Q1. If it wasn't for that, then Ferrari could have easily been on the row of the grid, the bottom of the top 10, the points paying positions. Now, of course, some people will be saying, well, there's a real downturn in terms of the performance of the car, and that's absolutely the case. I really do think that they're in trouble. They're in trouble, and that's going to be the title of this video most likely. Ferrari are in trouble this season because, with the greatest respect to Kimi Antonelli, he had a fantastic day, arguably driver of the day, to do what he did, but he started down in 16th position, and he ended up finishing ahead of the Ferraris comfortably up in 4th place. Nico Hülkenberg, who's in a Sauber, quite possibly the worst car on the grid, with the exception of Haas, and I'm going to do another video about Haas as well. Might be out the same time as this one, might be out slightly after, depending on the platform that you're viewing this on. But honestly, man, it was pretty bad. It really was. Now, again, Ferrari were there now. I think they were something like Leclerc was 5th before we had the mid-race kind of like shuffle and stuff, and the rainstorm came in. Leclerc was up in 5th, and Hamilton was in 8th. He was really struggling to get past Alex Albon. He was never in a position to overtake Alex Albon during the race. He just couldn't get past him at all. He got relatively close, he got DRS, but he never got close enough to use the overtake mode, that K1 mode that his race engineer was talking to him about. He never got close enough to actually deploy it and use it. Now, when the rain came, there were some drivers that decided to stay out on dry tyres. I think the McLarens, they pitted straight away, then the Red Bulls, or at least the Red Bull of Max Verstappen, pitted a bit late. And because of that, Ferrari actually led the race for a little bit. Lewis Hamilton actually led the race, I believe, for a little bit. And that was a massive gamble. And it's not the first time we've seen Ferrari take a big gamble in wet conditions, and it could have paid off for him. If the rain shower didn't last for as long as what it did, then perhaps they could have won the race or got a podium perhaps or something like that. That must be what they're thinking. But in terms of overall race pace, they just weren't there. They really weren't. Eventually, they did have to pit, and they went to the back of the grid. Only 14 finishes, of course, during this race, and a lot of guys really struggling. But effectively, they were the last guys on the lead lap at that point. I think they were like 11th and 12th, something like that, before the restart happened. They did gain a bit of ground back. Leclerc got up to 8th and Hamilton to 10th, but 5 points for Ferrari is paltry. It really is bad. They're in big trouble this season. We were talking about Ferrari potentially challenging for the championship, but they will need to improve the pace of that car massively. It is clear that it's not the sign that Hamilton is struggling to get used to this car. It is not the sign that Leclerc is just not gelling with this car. This car just doesn't have much pace. It's just not quick enough. Both of those guys are not far from each other. There was less than 3 seconds by the end of the race, so really there wasn't really much in terms of performance between the two drivers. drivers. The problem was the car, and the car just isn't quick enough. So there is hope, of course. I'm not writing Ferrari off completely, because, remember at the summer break last season, Ferrari were probably the fourth fastest car. They were definitely slower than Mercedes, definitely slower than McLaren, and probably slower than the Red Bull at that point. They were the fourth fastest car. And by the end of the season, they almost recovered to win the championship. They were only a little bit behind McLaren in the Constructors' Championship by the end of the season. So I'm not writing them off by any means. Things can change a lot. In a season as well where, when the final year of this regulations, as everybody keeps saying, and rightfully so, we're going to get limited development because of that. The teams are going to want to turn the taps off for 25 and go all in on 26 as soon as possible. So Ferrari, again, to use that word, the G word, gamble. They have to gamble. When are they going to transition to purely being on the 26 car? Because the longer they wait to do that, the worse it's going to be, the 26 car in theory. But you've also got Ferrari fans that are very hungry and passionate and wanting to see success. If they go to Imola, if they go to Monza, and they're at the bottom end of the points, there's going to be riots in Italy over that. The Italian press is going to absolutely crucify them for it. So they can't afford to do that either. It's a really tricky position. It really is. We'll have to see what happens in China. Maybe the conditions being cold and stuff like that wasn't really helping, but qualifying was in the dry. The race was in intermediate conditions, and in both sets of those conditions, albeit one in race conditions, 1 over 1 lap, Ferrari looked like the fourth fastest team if you're being generous. If you're being pessimistic, you'd say they're 5th or 6th, just given the fact that a Williams and a Racing Bull qualified ahead of them, and the likes of Mercedes, the likes of Williams, even a Sauber, and an Aston Martin finished ahead of them. Lance Stroll finished ahead of them in 6th. It's not looking good. But guys, what do you think about it? What's your take on Ferrari in their opening race? I think they really, really need to improve, and they need to do it sharpish, but it's going to take some time. This is not going to be an easy fix. It really isn't. And those rumours about them being behind Mercedes are absolutely true. It's absolutely accurate. No doubt about it. Your thoughts in the comments below as always, guys. Like, share, comment, subscribe as well to see much more content like this on the world of Formula 1. If you want to learn about why Kimi Antonelli had his penalty revoked after the Australian Grand Prix, the link to that will be shown at the end of this video in the end card if you're on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, go and search up the video. Go for our videos. We got a lot of videos going on. This is what we do here on the F1 Chronicle. So yeah, have a great time, guys. See you very soon, and have a fantastic start to your week. And we've got China coming up this week as well. It's a double header to start the 2025 season.